on this computer. All right, so we're excited for today's session with Dr. Janay Washington. The title is Behind the Curtain, Uncovering Experiences of Racial Discrimination in International Schools. I'll do a quick, brief bio, then turn it right on over to Dr. Washington. Dr. Washington is a radical scholar of educational leadership and theory. Her interests include looking at educational and political history to find foundational patterns in school systems that are characterized by isms and phobias. Dr. Washington is currently a doctor of philosophy in K-12 school leadership, and uses quantitative and qualitative data to find discriminatory patterns in hiring, curriculum, and institutional histories of schools. She started her career as a teacher in Virginia. She's worked in Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso. Her goals are to dismantle systems of oppression for students worldwide and create opportunities for educational leaders to learn how to live and lead in a world that is diverse. I'll turn it over to Dr. Washington.
All right, thank you. Thank you. You have one more slide here. Do you want to talk about these next two, or you want to just kind of go by?
We go by. We turn over.
All right, gotcha. Oh, wait, let me go back. Am I there? Okay. So first, I want to welcome everyone. I'm so glad to see a lot of my people here. I'm excited that Kevin has given me this platform, and so we're going to get into it all. I first want to, before I start this, let me go back here. When we're talking about acknowledging Indigenous land, I live on the land of the Chesapeakeans. They are a group of the Powhatan Nation, and also acknowledging the ancestors on the White Lion that was just 30 miles from where I live. So 1619, shameless plug, go ahead and read it. But the first documented Africans in this country came through where I currently live. So I just want to acknowledge both of those. And I also want to acknowledge all the people that participated in my research, those who I interviewed. Thank you for your stories. And I think that they will help forward all of the movements that Kevin spoke about and the ones that I'm working on in the background over here. So before we start, if you know me, you know I'm going to get into theory of how I'm looking at things. My research was based around the idea of school-based racial racism. All right, there's nothing outside of that. We talk about a lot of decolonization. We talk about a lot of imperialism. We talk about a lot of anti-racism, and all of those things I absolutely believe are a part of the theories, but we can't forget that we're working within the schools. And so if you look at the different theories I have, conflict theory in education, schools replicate exactly what's happening in society. So if you ever want to see what's about to happen in the world, just look at schools and look how it's structured. It unfortunately teaches people their place, and this is getting into social identity theory. It teaches them their place, whether they're an in-group, an out-group, who has power. It teaches them racism, it teaches them sexism, it teaches capitalism. So we have to be mindful that all of these ideas are working within our schools. So toward the end, the suggestions that I've made is looking at constructive leadership theory and looking at reciprocal processes, because we have to start holding school boards, school leaders, heads of school accountable for their actions and for their thinking amongst other interested parties. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there first. And also I want you all to know, if you know me, you know I don't mince words. And so I wanted to provide everybody with the trigger warning. I'll provide more as we go along in this presentation. So that way, if you're offended, you might want to look at yourself and check what you may have going on, because a lot of this isn't friendly for you, all right? All right, so we're going to start. These are different components. I'm going to start with just a summary of my research, the population that was used, a research question that I have not put on social media, so you all are actually going to see some research that I haven't put out there yet. And then we're going to look at the different continents in which I interviewed people, and there'll be some suggestions for schools and for DEIJ advocates and leaders and committees within their schools. All right, so my research focused on the racial discrimination of Black teachers in international schools. The reason why I did not look at all teachers is because I'm a firm believer that we need to write about our own people. And that was something that my committee chair actually said, that Black people need to write about Black people. We don't need any more white people writing about Black people. And so it was very near and dear to me to do this research. And it was mixed methodology, which means that I took surveys and I did interviews because I needed to get a larger understanding of what was happening. And it was also a social justice framework. So I went in to my research with the idea in mind that I was going to use this for social justice work. All right. So the population that was used, there were 84 respondents who qualified for the survey. There were 91 people that attempted to complete the survey. A couple of people had to be deleted, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There was representation from every habitable continent. And so there were Black teachers who were not American that taught at international schools in America. So a lot of people kind of don't think about that, but that was actually a thing. And one of these fun facts, if you were anywhere with me while I was doing my research, is that I actually had respondents who were non-Black people who tried to skew my survey results. So they falsely identified themselves as being Black. And I've actually received emails from Black and white teachers a little bit upset about the research that I was performing. And then when they went in and they shared the survey with other people, mainly Australians, who were very upset that I was talking about racism in international schools. And so it just got quite interesting because I knew that I was onto something. So here's all the good tea that you all did not receive yet on LinkedIn or on social media. I had 2 research questions, and this was the main one. What are the discriminatory experiences of self-identified Black teachers in K-12 international schools? And I wanted to look at how Black teachers were affected. Why is my light trying to cut off over here, y'all? Let me get this together. Oh, I guess it's not going to work. I hope you can still see me. So I wanted to look at how teachers were affected professionally, mentally, physically, or emotionally, or even a combination of them both. So the survey that I sent out had 15 questions. And after the statistical treatments of the data, the questions would group themselves based on how the respondents answered. So these groupings, these 3 that you see, these are the factors that came out of the survey from the 81 participants. And so the 3 factors were global perceptions of prejudice, access to information and scrutiny, and the effects of intolerance. And so the majority of participants experienced ideas of perceptions of prejudice, such as being singled out, experiencing different treatment than other racial groups within their school, and not receiving professional or promotional opportunities, but watching other racial groups have those same opportunities. Access to information and scrutiny appeared as other non-Black racial or ethnic groups receiving information that was not known to Black teachers. Promotions were more base-raced on in-group dynamics, and there was an over-scrutinization of their work that was similar or better than their non-Black colleagues. And so collectively, this is what launched me into developing some of my interview questions. The effects of intolerance included Black teachers identifying that different racial groups did not get along within their school, and there was a clear difference in treatment of Black teachers and an intolerance for Black teachers, and also the feeling of being isolated within the school. After the results of the factors, I wanted to see if they appeared in the stories of the teachers that I interviewed. A part of my research was the hope that the survey results would be confirmed through the teachers' experiences, and they absolutely were. So I'm going to start with each continent where I interviewed the participants, and then I'm going to share the stories. There were 10 participants for my interviews, but we're going to go continent by continent because it's important to realize how racism shows up differently in different spaces. I also want to say that this is going from the least volatile to the most volatile continents. And I did that on purpose because it's hard to kind of compare all of them together with just saying this is one experience. We experience racism and prejudice very different on different continents. So the participants in Asia, even though they were all in Asia, they had different experiences. Those at schools that were unmonitored or just ignorant, really do mean ignorant in all the sense of the word. They did not know much about Black people, Black culture, being curious. And I also, when I get to some of the participant stories, I will tell you a little bit more about what was happening externally as well, because Asia was a place where they experienced more external racism in their daily lives. And then there was also a participant who at the time thought that he was joining a like-minded school. And it was like that, for the most part. And then there seems to be that Black teachers are more tolerable of prejudice and racism because they know that a lot of it is ignorance and not actually having interactions with Black people. So I'll be referring to the participants with P and then a number. So P, 1 through 10. P2 had an extremely high tolerance for the ignorance. Oh, let me stop and say this. If you look at the text, these are the text boxes, or the speaking boxes are exact quotes from the interviews. And above and beneath each one of my participants is what they experienced. So take a little bit of time. I'll give you about a couple of seconds to read it and kind of just skim through before I start telling you about each one of these participants. All right, so P2 had an extremely high tolerance for the ignorance of her colleagues. However, she did not dismiss the actions of her colleagues, and she was able to navigate issues in her school fairly well. P2 actually worked not only in Asia, but she worked in the Middle East as well. So some of these overlap, but the experiences that they talked about, that's where I placed them, the continent that I placed them on for this presentation. And so when you look in her text box, I remember when she was explaining this story to me, how she was just so taken aback about the usage of the N-word by students who had never come in contact with Black people. And so they almost knew that it was a way to belittle people, even if you weren't Black. And I remember they actually asked her if she can talk with this student to get him to understand why they shouldn't use the word. Now, let's keep in mind, she was a teacher, she was not an administrator. And so she ended up kind of having to navigate that situation for that student. And she said that the timing of it was right after the George Floyd murder, and that's not even something that she would think that she would have to deal with at that moment in time. And so she was also taken aback by living in Asia as well with COVID. And she actually mentioned being out in public and being touched, or her hair being touched, or her body being touched, or people taking random pictures of her on the train. So she didn't deal with just racism within the school, it was outside of the school. And then during COVID, it was an extra layer of a lot of anti-American sentiment as well. So trying to battle through all three of those, it had been a time for her. And so P3 was a little bit different. She was very concerned about the well-being of her children with them being biracial. She said that she can tolerate the prejudice and racism, but she is not tolerable if the racism begins to affect her children or other students. And so P3 is actually in an interracial marriage. And she started off working at Christian international schools. And so as they've kind of gotten out of the realm of some of them, she's noticed that, as you see up here, being the only one, her children being the only one. And so she's had to be very mindful about looking into the schools that they go to, because if there's no diversity, she doesn't want her children around that, because it creates a worse effect as they get older. And so, and she actually mentions how she was at another school with, there was a family from Africa, and their child thought that they were white because all of their classmates were white. And nobody corrected this child to tell him that he was an African child. And so imagine parents having to navigate deconstructing racism to their child because they don't see other students or teachers that look like themselves. So the next place that we had was the Middle East. There were two participants, and they both had expectations that there would be racism. They were first taken aback and then learned to adjust to their environments. I'm only going to share one because the last one was with Asia. And so I'll give you a couple of seconds to read over her quotes and her summary. All right. So P7 was extremely dynamic in how she chose to navigate racism and prejudice. She shared that when she initially got to the Middle East, she was taken aback by racism to the point where she had to remove herself to wrap her mind around what was happening. It was a simple icebreaker activity, and they were going around saying, where they were from, and she was the only Black person in the group. And the way that someone asked her where she was from was in a way as though she was not supposed to belong. And she had to step out and take a moment to think about what just happened to her. And then she actually had colleagues that came back to ask if she was okay, because they understood the tone in which this colleague, who was also a white man, decided that he was going to speak to her. And so after that, she continued to just kind of do what she does, doing excellent work. She actually mentioned in her interview how she was applying for administration jobs, and she had to jump through 1,001 hoops in order to even be considered, although she was already doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. And it was almost as though she had to prove that she should be in those positions. And ironically enough, they hired another white man in a position very similar to hers. And he pretty much, matter of fact, it was the white man before she got into the position, absolutely destroyed the position. He was giving explicitly sexual comments to some of her colleagues. And so he had a lot going on, but he was put in that position with no experience. And so she decided that as she moved forward and went to different schools, that she would begin to develop more relationships with the local staff and really being an ally from within and calling out racism in her authentic self. She described herself as being loud. She's going to be to the point. She's going to be blunt. And so she's going to walk in all of her, authenticity. So that way, when she sees other teachers that are Black, when she sees students that are Black, when she sees families that are Black, that they know that this is what you get, what you see is what you get. And she didn't want to hide behind any of the code switching or hair. Hair was a big thing for all the women across the board, or how you wear your hair or how you choose to dress. She didn't want to hide behind any of those things. She wanted to be exactly who she was. And so just a very, very dynamic person to speak with. And also, I'm going to get into that when I provide my suggestions, but she also brought up how a lot of these schools are based in colonization. And so a lot of people don't want to acknowledge the histories of their schools, but they're still perpetuating the same racist ideologies and prejudice that are practiced in the Western world. And it's just traveled on over to other parts of the world. So Europe. So these are the trigger warnings, because this is where things begin to get extremely volatile. So there were 3 teachers interviewed who worked in Europe. I will tell you about 2. And then there's another one that is under Africa. It was the second most prejudiced and racist continent from the interview participants. Participants experienced both covert and overt racism, as well as ignorance of how schools should interact with Black people. It's almost as though they didn't know, or at least that's what they tried to tell the participants. And the participant that I did not put in Europe, she was actually unable to talk about her experience in Europe because she was still working through and healing from the trauma that happened to her. So she wouldn't even talk about it. And respectfully, I understood. So I'll give you a few seconds to read this as well. All right, so P1 is a radical advocate for racial equity and decolonization. She was a third culture kid and has been both a victim of racism and prejudice as a student and as a teacher. She experienced racism from board members and parents where they would not even acknowledge her presence in the school. And she was a constant advocate for all Black teachers and all Black students, providing them with a safe space inside of her school. Her story was one of the most volatile out of the interview participants. And just so you all know, I had to take sometimes days in between my interviews to really process what other people had gone through. And so P1 speaks multiple languages. And so a lot of the racism that happened was, first, it almost seemed as though the people in her school didn't feel as though she should have access to their language because she was a Black woman. And so questioning, her credentials or why she speaks the language the way that she does, as though she wasn't supposed to have mastery over her languages. Also, her, her hair, beautiful afro, her being exactly who she was, seemed offensive to them. They didn't want to acknowledge that she was proud to be a Black woman, and having to navigate having safe spaces for her students and calling out even DEIJ work within the school. I remember her explaining that, there were people that were pretending to do DEIJ work or stealing the work of other people without, acknowledging their efforts and moving forward. And what was even more interesting was that that person was not a white person, it was another person of color. And so in order to forward themselves with the DEIJ work or get themselves to where they wanted to be, they would just go through and take other people's ideas, where there were, other Black teachers in the school really doing the work, but not being acknowledged for the work because of the racial dynamics. And so if you look at her quote, it was very interesting, not feeling safe. And she even felt as though her continuing to speak out about the racism and prejudice that was built within the school, that she would begin to lose opportunities to do the work that she's been doing, that she loves to do. And if she had any ambitions on moving forward with other positions, that might cost her those positions. And so just really a dynamic interview participant that I had. P4 is also very interesting. She is from the US, had been an advocate, had worked internationally. She had actually did volunteer work in Africa. And so she actually landed in Europe because schools in Africa refused to interview her. So while she's in Europe, something that I was actually taken aback by was a lot of these interview participants really could pinpoint the racism coming into full effect around when George Floyd was murdered. And so she shared with me how she was watching everything from Europe back in the US, and her family are, strong advocates of racial justice, and really having to wear the trauma of being overseas, not being home, and really feeling for your family and making sure that they're safe, and just really keeping up with the volatility that we know exists inside of the United States. And so she recalls asking for a day off from work so she can just process what's going on. And this is where her quote comes from, that like her administrators didn't even understand why it was an issue. They didn't want to understand, and that it should somehow be a teachable moment that she should share with her students. And so her being the person she was, she told them, like, I'm not asking you for a day off. I'm telling you I'm not coming to work. Go ahead and give me my day and let's move along. And also she said that there was a lot of ignorance from the director because he wanted to compare the fight for racial, justice and equity with that of the LGBTQ community. And that's kind of interesting because you have Black people who are fighting for racial equity, and you also have Black teachers that are a part of the LGBTQ community that are also fighting for rights in that area as well. And so it was just a huge false equivalency for her. And she had to tell him, like, these things are not the same. And even the ignorance of her director, thinking that because they had membership of those people, different racial groups inside of the school, or even that the country had representation in the government of LGBTQ community members, that meant that there was no racism inside of the school. So she kind of just took a backseat. She was also doing DEIJ work, but she noticed that there was a lot of tone policing. So she would say something in a meeting and then they wouldn't hear her. And then a white woman would say something, the exact same thing after she said it, and they were more apt to listen to that white woman. And so she actually took a step back from the DEIJ committee, and a person that she felt was an ally, she suggested to her administration that they took over, because she did not want to be the spokesperson for all things equity, all things that were diverse, because she understood that it was going to fall upon deaf ears. And so she still did the work, but she did it in a way where her mental health would not suffer. And she also dealt with being disrespected by students because the students thought they were smarter than her. And then when she fired back and the students realized that they were dealing with an intelligent Black woman, then all of a sudden the students tried to act like whatever they were commenting on or whatever they were saying to her was not racist, and their families fully supported those students, saying that their children couldn't possibly be racist because they don't know anything about racism and being prejudiced. So this is a trigger warning. Africa was absolutely the most volatile continent out of the participants that I interviewed. All participants were able to give multiple clear-cut overt examples of racism and prejudice. And you would think that Black teachers would be more welcome in Africa, but that absolutely was not the case. And so there are actually 5 interview participants, so this part's a little bit longer, of their experiences, shall I say. So I'll give you some seconds to read this. All right, so P5 is also a very interesting story. P5 was actually able to work at her school in 2 different time spans. So when she originally got to the school, had a very diverse administrative team that had people that were Black, that were Jewish, men, women, they were from all over the world. The school had a very diverse teaching staff. And so that was her initial experience. And so she ended up leaving school and then coming back a few years later to only find that her school had been whitewashed with administration, all white, everything. And so she understood that the dynamics of the school had been different, but P5 being the person that she was going to keep persevering through what was happening. Unfortunately, P5, she's very tenacious. And so she always works to uplift her colleagues and to make things better. Like her goal is, let's make things better, let's dismantle what's going on here, and let's move forward. But what she found was that her administration, her principal in particular, would actually pit the indigenous people of her country, of that country, toward the Western teachers, especially if they were Black. And so they would utilize Black teachers that were from the West as a way, as almost an aspiration point for the teachers who were indigenous of that country. And so it turned into a problem because it turned into a discord, and she actually described it as a plantation. And then you have people in the house and you have people in the field, and you decide who's going to be who, and you put them against each other so that people misunderstand that they're in the same exact situation. And so her school has been extremely volatile. As you can see, the situation, which I actually saw on Twitter, of a white teacher using the N-word with students inside of the library when they were listening to music and reading. And he didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And the school initially was going to try and keep this man employed, but the outrage of the students and the international community was the reason why he was released. And I didn't want to put this up here, but you know, while I'm already here during this point, there was also an incident of an Israeli parent who referred to one of the African parents and called her a monkey, called this African woman a monkey. A fight ensued and broke out. And it was because that mother decided that her child should get whatever he wanted and she was not monitoring him. And she decided to use her privilege as a white woman in that instance, to make the African mom feel less than. And so instead of the school being proactive and trying to really dismantle what happened and really get to the root cause, they pretty much just, opened up some more DEIJ work and tried to just move forward. And some of the responses, it was almost like it was a late response as well. And so P5 has just been working to encourage leadership in the school, to actually call out racism and to be proactive in dismantling it. And so very, very interesting situation. P10, P10 is a very, very unique situation as well. P10 is actually from the country that he works in, so he's indigenous of that country. However, he spent time in the United States and he's married to an American wife. And so he has an American passport. And he's taught all over Africa. He's also taught in the United States. And so he initially thought that he would be going back to his home country and that it would be welcome and it'd be open arms and that he could really work as an ally for his countrymen and also kind of building that bridge between administration and also the indigenous people. And so, however, he was actually met with the idea that he should only be American and that they hired him as an American and he can't be anywhere within matters of his country. And so initially, P10 wanted to help his countrymen, the indigenous people of his school, work out some of their labor rights. And they banned him from attending the meetings. And he was also he applied to become the head of his department. And they said that he wasn't qualified for that, even though he was actually one of the most educated teachers in the building. And so he actually dealt with a lot of confrontation from his administrator because he was well loved. He spoke both languages and actually more than one language. And it was seen as a threat. And so he's dealt with a lot of backlash and cutting his hours and putting him in positions to where he still has to do the work that he was doing before, but he's not actually paid to do that work. P8 also is a Francophone speaker, actually probably speaks another language as well, and he speaks English. He was actually a fellowship, Fulbright fellow in the United States. And so he actually has his credentials, his teaching credentials from the United States. So he also returned home to his home country and works really hard, has really good relationships with his colleagues. But he discovered that it didn't matter how qualified he was. It didn't matter where he received his education. He understood that because he was indigenous to that country, that he was merely a local. And I don't even like the terminology of using local because it demeans the expertise, the intelligence, and the experience that indigenous teachers to a country have. And so again, they've been, his colleagues have been running their department, and they're always trying to bring someone from France to head their department because the school feels as though if they had a white Frenchman or woman there, that the department would look more legitimate. And so they're constantly battling, that fight with their administration, and not just one head of school. This has happened to through multiple heads of school. And what's even more dangerous about this is that there's a file that they keep on all of the indigenous people of the school. So that way, when the next director comes in, they're almost already briefed on who these teachers are, and they try to discount them from positions and being promoted. So very nasty work at this school as well. And I didn't even give you all a moment to read about them. I apologize, you all. I was just kind of in my little flow. So we also had P6. P6 taught on multiple continents, but the racism that she experienced in Africa was very different. She experienced white parents not wanting her to teach their children because she was Black, and white colleagues trying to police her in her DEIJ work. And she's also an advocate of showing up authentically. and being exactly who she is. And she made a very interesting point that they hire Black teachers who they think are going to toe the line. They think that you are going to be docile. They think that you are not going to speak on what is happening. And they actually think that you will not speak up for the indigenous staff members and faculty of that country as well. And so for her, it was more an irritation because after her experience in Europe, she really learned how to navigate racism. So instead of sitting in the back and internalizing the racism that was happening, she knew that it was just better to speak about what was going on, because the consequences of her speaking were going to be her probably leaving the school anyway. So she just took her chances and moved forward. I'll give you a few seconds to read the last participant. All right, so P9 was actually a very, very intriguing interview for me. P9 is a little bit older, and so he had a different perspective of racism and prejudice because of his age. He initially tried to dismiss some of the incidents and occurrences of racism as just people being ignorant. But what was interesting about his interview is the more that he talked about it and he reflected about it, he realized how much he had not reflected on some of the issues that happened to him. And he just kind of kept moving forward instead of taking time out to understand what was happening. So P9 was at different schools in Africa. And his first school, he was actually also a Fulbright fellow and was hired by a diverse faculty or diverse leadership. And then as they started to filter out that school leader, when a white man came to work at the school, so his first year that he was there, one of the other Black American teachers were let go. And then the next year he was let go without cause. There was no reason at all. They just said that they didn't want him to return. And so he actually thought that the director at that time, and even the one before him, wanted to get all of the Black Americans out because of how outspoken they may have been. And maybe feeling as though the indigenous people of that country were easier to deal with. And so he kind of chalked it up to that, but he kept moving. But when he went to go work, he worked in a country where he enjoyed himself. He had a white director, but that director was actually already doing a lot of, racial justice and equity work within the school. And so it was a very, very dynamic and wonderful place for him to work. So he left that country and then went to another one. And this was also around the time that George Floyd was murdered. And what he recognized was that, okay, because now people are starting to talk about racism in international schools, this might be a prime time to where I'll get hired. People will notice, my credentials because they're coming to look for Black teachers. And he found out that that was not the case. And so it took him months to be offered a job. And the one thing that I remember, there were a couple of things that he said that just stuck with me. And one of them was that he remembers getting on the plane or getting off of the plane and going to the school. And when he looked around at all of the hires, all of them looked the same. All of them had the same accent, blonde hair or brown hair from the Midwest, as we call it in the US. And they all spoke the same way. They all dressed the same way. And it was funny because his principal looked exactly like the women that they hired. And he's kind of trying to figure out how he ended up getting hired. And so he mentioned that search associates, he went through them and they didn't really help. And so he said, what is the point of going through these organizations if you're actually not working to help schools diversify their teaching body? And how not having Black teachers and even teachers of color, as he mentioned, not having them inside of the hiring process and not really advocating for them, you're taking away the experiences from children having more diverse teachers and having a different perspective and view. And the last part that I'll share that he said that it still sticks with me, every other week I think about it, he said, there are some people, he said, people that are ignorant, they're just kind of sloppy with the things that they say because they don't know any better. He said, but racists are extremely careful and they know how to navigate and know how to move and they know how to wield their power. And so from those interviews and taking all that in, and you all, it was literally about 30 hours of me breaking down research. I want to talk about some of the practices and suggestions that I have for international schools. And so these suggestions are not from the participants. They're from what I pulled from my research and what I pulled from each of these interviews. And so for P1, directors must openly call out the racism that they see from board members, parents, teachers, and students. And if you believe your position as a director or head of school is neutral, then you're a part of the problem. Racial equity advocates cannot successfully implement practices without the support of the director or head of school. So it's one of those, you have to check yourself. You are not neutral. You should be on the side of justice. You should be on the side of what's right. And from P2, allow Black teachers to stay in our positions or pay us for extra work. And Black teachers are teachers. They are not the spokesperson for all things racial, okay? Each group experiences racism different. So when racism or prejudice arises, especially with students, school leadership is responsible for the discipline of those students. You can collaborate and consult with Black teachers about how to navigate Black racial issues. Black non-administrative teachers are not responsible for quelling racially based incidents in their school. If you would like them to be responsible, pay them for their services, pay them for their consultation, but don't just think they're there for you at your whim in order to resolve your racial issues. From P3's interview, be honest about your school. When making a decision to hire Black teachers, please be honest about your Black population, your Black student body, your Black teacher body, and your administrative body. Don't lie about it because Black teachers, we go to the websites. We look to see how many Black people there are or names that even look remotely Black because we do not want to be alone in those schools. All right, be honest, don't lie. From P4, suggest less, compare less, and listen more. This is a huge one. The trauma that Black teachers experience is not a teachable moment. And the commodification, and this was also from P1, the commodification of Black teachers and Black student trauma is racist. It is racist. Do not do it, all right? White colleagues, it's okay to not completely understand what is happening. It's fine. Regarding Black trauma, you are in no position to suggest how Black teachers and students should respond. Refrain from comparing Black racial trauma to the other DEIJ struggles, all right? Allow Black people to navigate and heal from their trauma without your suggestions. From P5's interview, division tactics of Black Westerners and Black Africans should not be used. And I specifically said Black Africans because you have occasions where someone says, well, I'm a white African. Well, I'm not talking to you, okay? For the people using these tactics, you've been seen, okay? You're seen, we know what you're doing. Black African teachers are not less than Black Western teachers. They are not just local teachers. They are experienced professionals and more familiar with the country than anybody in the school. Black Westerners are not the middlemen and middle women to perpetuate racial hierarchies or uphold white supremacy, even if you are finding willing participants in the school to do so, all right? Please stop that, you've been seen. So for P6, what I gathered, hiring committees and school leadership should complete a self-assessment of their prejudice before hiring. Kevin, I think this might be a place for ALOC to step in because you have to hire outside people because we all know how people like to look at data and say that they found something that doesn't exist or by no means are they racist in any way. Do not hire Black teachers to say your school is diverse. We're not here as, and for that matter, any person of color or any person belonging to any diverse group. Stop hiring us just to say that it's diverse. Self-prejudice and racist ideology may not be easily identifiable to school leadership, but it becomes very identifiable for Black teachers. Simply stated, you might not know you're a bigot or a racist. The idea results in you minimizing the experience of racism in your schools. There's a lot of directors out there that you don't have a lot of interactions with Black people outside of being over them in a position of power inside of a school. So you have no idea that you have a problem. So for P7's interview, investigate your school ties to an oppressive history, acknowledge it, and move forward. And also, Black teachers should not have to perform a dog and pony show to be considered for leadership. I found during my research that schools that are considered to be top tier often have foundations that are based in imperialism or the oppression of another group of people. Your school's rich history is probably tied to some form of racism or bigotry hidden behind the cause of globalization. Schools founded by missionary workers are not exempt from this idea either. Like teachers are certified, educated, and experienced. If you hire a white man or woman with less experience, less education, and no certification, you might be a racist and you are upholding white supremacy. Also, please refrain from the good fit ideology. A good fit is a dog whistle for racists. From P8's interview, look for opportunities to build your locally hired teachers into leaders from within your school. And when I say locally hired teachers, I'm talking about the people that are indigenous, not people that have come from somewhere else and got hired there because their husbands work for some NGO, all right? In countries where there is political instability, locally hired indigenous teachers are your greatest asset. When turmoil arises, the school will depend on them to maintain its mission. They are qualified, and if they are not, grow them and invest in their promotion, especially in non-English speaking countries. P9, school leadership should maintain practices of documenting proper professional goals, performing research-based observations, and following proper labor laws of that country. Black teachers often receive non-renewals or layoffs without cause. There are some Black teachers who should not be renewed as well. All right, let's not get it twisted. Not all Black teachers are good teachers. But be fair in your assessment. Again, if you simply do not like the person, check your prejudice, all right? And then the last one, P10, avoid choosing the part of the Black teacher persona that you want. Accept all parts of Black teachers professionally. Black teachers intersect identities like all other people. When you forge Black teachers into one part of their personality, you are demonstrating an intolerance for their entire and whole well-being, all right? Take them, take us as we are. So that concludes, and I'm like right at my little timer, Kevin, but I know there probably isn't any time for questions, but if you have any, of course, I'm always more than willing to answer them. And thank you so much for allowing me to share a little bit about what I found in the stories of some of the Black teachers that I interviewed.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Let's give her some virtual love. If you have questions, want to come off and ask, or you want to type them in the chat, we'll look for them.
I'm going to stop unsharing the presentation. Is that all right? Okay. Boom.
Hello, Dr. Washington.
Hi.
My name is Tracy. Just phenomenal research. I'm doing my dissertation on Black women leaders in international schools, and just hearing what you're saying is resonating with what I'm learning. But it was just powerful to hear, hard to hear. But thank you for your work. And yeah, I just needed to just thank you.
And thank you for your work, because that work is needed as well. And I'm just glad to see more of this work coming out. So yeah. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Washington.
Hi.
Hi, what an amazing job. I think you're just exceptional. You're a queen. I love this presentation. Thank you so much. It was a little triggering for me. I have a question. I've been a leader in Rwanda this is my 4th year, but due to some of the some of what's in your presentation, I'm now leaving. So I have a couple of interviews tomorrow. You know, I presented at the IB conference, networking. I no longer know where the safe places are. Do you have any recommendations on where these safe places may be as a leader? I'm a primary school principal. Those are the positions I'm applying for. I have no idea now.
So I want you, if you can put your information in the chat, I will definitely let you know what I know. I would know if you want to stay in Africa that it's extremely volatile, like it is. And I'm not going to say that I wouldn't suggest leadership there. Have you connected with the school leader in Brazzaville?
No.
Okay, so yeah, if you can put your information in chat, I can definitely let you know where are safe and unsafe places from the experience from my research.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that will help. I'm meeting with someone from Switzerland tomorrow. I'm meeting from a school in Angola, which is well known over there, but I've never been. So yeah, I'm looking for that safe space. So yeah, I will give you my information. And again, thank you so much for this presentation. I needed to hear it. It was a little triggering, but I definitely needed to hear it. I felt alone in this mindset, in this fight.
Oh no, you're definitely not alone. And I was more than honored to be able to share this so we don't feel alone. So thank you so much. And I see a question up here. The focus was not on Black teachers in Africa. And you know, something interesting that actually happened, I was kind of asked not really to split my research, not by, it's by some other people that I looked into or consulted with. I looked at Black teachers all over the world because I wanted people to see whether you're a Black American, you're a Black African, you're Black from the Caribbean, you're Black from Europe, you're Black from Asia. The same things are happening to us worldwide. And so it's just not specific to US teachers, it's all of us.
And one more thing. So I'm also interested in a head of school position. So I have my application out in different places. So one of the agencies just interviewed me for a position in Brussels. And so I asked about diversity and they said, oh, we're very diverse. Half of the team is LGBTQ. So that covers our diversity. No, it really did.
Oh, I'm going to send you an email.
And they told me that was Brussels, but they said it'd be better for me to look at the position that's in Paris because they might be more open to the diversity piece. So yeah.
Oh, Brussels is a nasty piece of work. So,
Okay.
and at least they know, like, oh, you should go to France. Yeah, I'll send you a message.
Okay.
I'll send you a message.
Thank you.
Let me see. Hold on. And Kevin, make sure, like, I don't want to sign off before getting everyone's email. So I don't know if you're getting it for me, Kev, but I hope you are.
Actually, if anyone's on here, you do not want your email shared, let us know. Because I can share, we can pull the registration, as a follow-up.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm kind of going through, are there any safe spaces? Jeanette, you know, honestly, I feel like we have to, and one of the participants said it, we spend so much time navigating racism our whole life that we're experts at this point. And I think that, you know, Kevin would probably have more ideas of schools that are safe spaces, but I think we should always prepare ourselves to know that those interactions are coming because they are. Whether it's internal or external, I think you just have to know your level of tolerance that you have, and then that's how you can move forward. Let me see, there were a couple of, you know, so I'll say this because, you know, I'm all about putting people on blast. I reached out to ISS Schools was good about working with me and collaborating with me to help me with my research. I reached out to Search Associates and I got no response. So I don't think that people want to come to the reality of what some of this information is. ASA, you know, if I'm provided the opportunity to work with them, I will do so. And so I just want you all to know that like, this is only like 10% of what was shared. I didn't even really get into a lot of some of the other triggering experiences of Black teachers, but there's far more. And so just being careful about, you know, protecting the people that interviewed with me, protecting and other Black teachers, because if this really hits and gets out, we know how that's going to go.
Yes, and I would just like to share, we began interviewing for my position and our high school position from Search Associates, and every candidate, all 18, has been white men. And they will be coming out for their in-person interviews, not this week, but next week. All 2 white candidates for my position in primary and 2 white candidates in high school. So we didn't have a chance to even interview anyone of color.
Wow.
Just to share that, yeah.
Let me hop in here real quick. I'm sorry to jump in. And I feel like that needs to be called out, literally.
Kevin, I have tried directly with my head of school. And honestly, I believe that I've been pushed out. And I believe that the high school principal who's been here for 14 years has been pushed out as well. So I don't think anyone sees what has happened. And I don't believe that anyone's standing up, but I did call out because his first initial meeting with us was saying he was going to bring in just one candidate who was actually in the back of my presentation at the IB conference. He was sitting back there to find out more about the school. He happened to be the only one chosen. So in a meeting of four principals, I was the only one who said, in order to have candidates, we need to have candidates. You can't just have one person come out, because he talked about them looking for housing. And then about a day later, I guess he thought about it. Again, I was alone in this conversation, and he said, okay, we'll have 2 white men for primary and 2 white men for high school. So yeah, I tried to call it out, Kevin, and it was, of course, he's pissed off at me now. So
You can send to us, he can be pissed off at me. You can literally, I gave you the email address because we have a few things going on. One is actually in France right now that happened this week. And again, some of these are non-affiliated ALOC school members. Of course, we go a little bit harder at them and the expectation. But the non-member schools, well, that's fine. We have no affiliation. We have no, in terms of bringing that to light. So
I can share that with you, the entire statement, and then, okay.
As well as that
Okay,
data,
great.
because that data, so they know that the X amount, we had X amount of people up for this role and all of them identified as this. There's no reason for that.
Okay, thank you.
And the whole, this old way of we can't find or people aren't applying is a lie. We have an Aspiring Leaders of Color program. We are in cohort number 3, 15 folks. This is the largest cohort. And so one of our reach outs coming up is going to be to these recruitment agencies in terms of I'm gonna be honest, like a fast track. So you're partnering with us. So it should be, here's a bulk of folks who are interested in leadership positions that have been mentored by current heads that have retired, and they're consistently in communication with them. So there's no reason. So there's 2 other organizations for leadership organizations that reached out to us too, who want to do work around leadership. And so for us, it's like, it's not just saying it. What are the actions? What are the outcomes we want? We know what we want. That's why we started Aspiring Leaders of Color program, because people kept saying in all these spaces, oh, there's no one, we don't get folks from the global majority applying. It's like, no, they're applying and they're beyond qualified. That's how ALOC was started. The young lady who was applying was beyond qualified for that headship.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've shared my job description. I've shared the post, and none of my friends or none of my colleagues or people that I know, Black women, were called back or contacted at all. So thank you for sharing that. I'll be giving you more information, Kevin. Appreciate it.
I think that might be it. If let me put my email in the chat. Let me put it. So if any of you want to reach out to me, you can find me. I'm not hard to find. And also, oh wait, I only sent that. I didn't send that to the group. So
Before we log off, I want to also congratulate Dr. Washington from the International Community School of Abidjan. I tried to get all the people that were there when you were one of our colleagues there. So we just want to tell you, Janay, we're so proud of you and all the work and all this research. And I'm so grateful that we have a platform, a safe space, an affinity group here that can have this support. So well done. I'm going to shout out your colleagues, my fellow, Janine Stiegel. And you know, Kevin's my brother from Flint, Michigan. So this is a great forum to say how proud I am of Flint Town represented in this house. And I'm just grateful to be a part of this amazing transformative movement, because this is exactly what it is. And Kevin, I will see you in the continent next month. We will find you. We will find you.
Right, I'm in Ghana next month.
thank you, Albanese. Greatly appreciate it. And I love y'all. Thank you.
Well done.
And some of my other former colleagues, I love you all. And you all really helped me get through difficult times. And I love you all. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Janay. Hey, Janay, if you could pull those slides back up, I want to make sure folks know some upcoming stuff and some
Got
stuff
you.
involved. I forgot about that. And make sure people are aware. Thanks, Albany.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me get there. Is it?
Or was that one that
Oh,
you
let me-
asked, that A-Lock one?
Yeah, I gotta go all the way back. I don't know why it wouldn't let me go from the current slide, but it's cool. Oh, go back, go back. Let's start from this one, right?
Okay, we'll start from there and then we go
Okay.
backwards. All right, our first in-person conference is coming up, Vietnam. Very excited. It's hosted at Eunice. If you apply to present, you'll hear within the next 1 to 2 weeks about acceptance in terms of that. Again, in terms of attending, let us know if there's any issues in terms of if your school is saying, oh, no, we won't, reach out to us, please. Upcoming things, our Spine Leaders Color program is tomorrow. We got Filipino International Educator Finney Group tomorrow. Again, we do recruitment. It is focused on our own A-Lock schools. We don't have time to play with all these schools out here because they'd have to get vetted. And that would take a process. So we're starting with our own A-Lock school members as it relates to recruitment, as it relates to this work that we were just talking about in terms of pathway into leadership, who's being developed, what does retention look like, and how it could be of support. You go next slide. And then I think it's one more. Yep. We have our virtual conference is the 5th of November. We invite everyone out to that. It's one day. We moved it back because it's we knew we were doing an in-person conference, but it's one day. All the information is right up on the website. Come on out. We got some stellar speakers that are going to be holding space. So we're excited. But thank you all for joining us. Again, any feedback, anytime, you can reach us. ALOC.org is the website. We thank you for being here. If it's your first time, come on back. If you're a repeat offender, come on back. We thank you again, Dr. Washington, just for your presentation. There's a growing body of research. I was on with another person who is finishing up her PhD this week. We have a research collective, like I said, when it comes to indigenized folks. So we are really, Dr. Taylor, who finished her research this past year, and Dr. Dale Taylor are really doing a lot when it comes to making sure those topics are out there, as well as if there's something that you want to see that's research. That's one thing that they're open to as well. So thank y'all. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Again, the recordings are up on YouTube. You all register, so we have email addresses so we can follow up with you all. We thank you and have a good one.